Hi, this is Julian, civil rights attorney in Chicago. I'm going to react to the dash cam video that showed the tragic shooting of Leonard, a man who spent 16 years in prison for a crime he didn't commit and then lost his life after being shot by the police. So he's definitely speeding. Wow, he really moved past that officer. So I'm just going to pause it right there. We haven't gotten to the actual incident yet, but let me just say that speeding by itself does give the police a reason not only to stop you, but it's also an arrestable offense. Traffic violations are arrestable offenses. People don't really know that. They think that you can just get a ticket and move on, but they are actually things that the police can arrest you for. The Supreme Court said that in a case called Atwater a few years back. So he is pulling over. All right, he sees the lights and he's going to pull over. So that's, I guess that's good, but we know how it's going to end. It's going to end tragically.
For change that item for 2 Tango. Step out! Step out! Get out! Get!
So it is a little interesting that the police officer automatically asks him to get out of the vehicle and seems to be doing it kind of aggressively. At least from everything that I know about this incident, it wasn't like Mr. Cure had any warrants or the truck was reported stolen. So the fact that the officer is kind of starting so, I guess the word I can use is aggressively, is kind of interesting. But then those who would defend the officer would say that, well, he's using that tone of voice and resorting to kind of that level of aggression due to the fact that he believes that this individual was speeding fast and may have been trying to evade. But again, you know, that's kind of what one would say on the other side. On the other side of that coin, you could say, well, he's speeding. A lot of people speed. He pulled over. He didn't take you on a 10-mile police chase. Why didn't you just walk up to the vehicle calmly like anyone else would and just try to initiate a traffic stop? So it's just something really interesting when you kind of see these police interactions, kind of how they can either start very aggressively or they can start as regular traffic stops. This one here, just from what I'm seeing so far, is kind of starting with a little bit of tension. But again, the officer would say he was going 100 miles an hour. I needed him out of the vehicle. Didn't know maybe he was trying to flee some sort of crime. Didn't know.
Out! Put your hands back here. I ain't doing shit. Put your damn hands back here. Who are you? Staff Sergeant of the Sheriff's Office. My name is Yahweh. I don't care. Step to the rear of this vehicle. In the name of who? In the name of the law of the state of Georgia. Step back here now or you're getting tased. I'm going. Watch me now. Put your hands.
All right, so the officer has Mr. Cure out of the vehicle. Mr. Cure does start to say some odd things and he's putting up some resistance. Now again, so kind of going both sides. The officer, those who would defend the officer would say that I gave him a lawful verbal command. He had broke the law. He got out of the vehicle reluctantly. When he got out, he didn't follow my commands. He was acting kind of erratically. He, resisted the lawful commands that I gave him, and then I went up my force continuum, which is to then threatened him to, if he didn't comply, that I would tase him. Now, those who would defend Mr. Cure would say, why were you so aggressive with him? Why did you feel the need to pull out your taser? He hadn't struck you. He hadn't hit you. There was no fight that was ensuing. What was the need for you to continue to escalate? And then they would say that perhaps that the officer escalated this situation. That's kind of how civil rights attorneys and civil rights cases go. You have to look at both sides. What would those defending the officer say, and what would those defending the individual who was interacting with the officer say? But just from my perspective and what I'm seeing right now, Mr. Cure did not follow lawful commands when the officer told him to get out of the vehicle and to place his hands back there. Now, you may also say, why does he need to place his hands on the car? Why does the officer need to detain him? Why doesn't he just ask for his license and his registration and insurance? That's a very valid question. Why didn't the officer just ask for his license, registration, and insurance? But remember, like I said, the officer doesn't need to do that per se. They can do that because he already caught Mr. Cure going very fast over the speed limit. That's enough to arrest Mr. Cure right there because he violated traffic laws. But it is interesting that the officer did immediately go to ask him to place his hands on the car as opposed to just trying to talk to him. Why are you speeding? What's going on? Is there something I need to know about? Give me your license, your registration, and your proof of insurance.
Hands on the back of that truck. Do you see that? Put your hands on the back of that truck. Back of the truck. Both hands. Turn around. 34, Kevin, send me another unit. One non-compliant.
Go out of unit right 34 at the office.
Your name is Officer who? Staff Sergeant Aldridge with the Camden County Sheriff's Office.
Who county?
Camden County. Put your hand behind your back.
Do I have a warrant? No. Excuse me.
Either put your hands behind your back or you're getting tased. I'm telling you that right now.
Why am I getting tased?
Because you are under arrest for speeding and reckless driving.
I'm not driving. Nobody was hurt. How was I speeding?
You passed me doing 100 miles an hour.
Okay, so that's a speeding ticket, right?
You see right there, the officer told him he's going to arrest him for speeding and reckless driving. Because I told you a few moments ago that you can be arrested for traffic violations. People think you can just get a ticket, but police officers can arrest you. And based off how fast Mr. Cure was going, at least at the beginning of this video, he was moving pretty fast on the interstate. But at this point, Mr. Cure has not followed commands. The officer told him to put his hands behind his back. He didn't. Now, Mr. Cure would say, why am I being arrested? Why are you treating me like this? I was just speeding. Just give me a ticket and send me on my way. You haven't even asked me if I have a valid license or any registration, or do I have my proof of insurance? Why are you not taking the normal steps that you would take during a regular traffic stop? And that's a valid question to ask. Why has the officer resorted to immediately arresting him? Why not try to figure out what's going on? He has no information about whether or not Mr. Cure has a warrant on him. He has no information about whether or not Mr. Cure is fleeing some sort of crime that's been committed. At this point, he's just a regular guy who's speeding down the interstate. Happens all the time. Why are we needing to resort to arresting me immediately?
Sir, tickets in the state of Georgia are criminal offenses.
I don't have a ticket in Georgia.
You do now?
Why?
You passed me doing 100 miles an hour.
And what? Am I going
Hands behind your back.
Yeah, see right there, Mr. Cure said that's a speeding ticket. So he's actually kind of tracking some of the things that I'm saying, which is that why not just give me a speeding ticket? Why are you arresting me? Why do I need to be incarcerated? This actually gives me a lot of insight into perhaps what caused Mr. Cure to do what he's going to do in a few moments, which is the fear of being arrested again.
Yes, you're going to jail. Hands behind your back. Put your hands behind your back.
All right, so the officer just tased Mr. Cure. From the perspective of a civil rights attorney, again, I know what's going to happen in the end with this situation, but let's just break it down segment by segment. From the perspective of a civil rights attorney, let's just take it in terms of what Mr. Cure has done and what the officer has done. What type of threat has he perceived? So Mr. Cure has sped. He did pull over. He didn't take the officer on a chase. He was a little bit resistant in terms of when he got out of the car and some of the things he was saying, but still, Mr. Cure did not strike the officer, did not hit the officer. He did not try to attack the officer. He did not try to run or flee. He did not try to grab a weapon or do anything like that. At this point, he's simply just trying to figure out, why are you trying to arrest me? Can you just give me a ticket and send me on my way? Now, Right before Mr. Cure is tased right here, the officer says, put your hands behind your back. Mr. Cure doesn't do it immediately, and then he goes to tase him. Some would say that could be excessive because he has his back towards him. He has not tried to hit him or strike him or fight him or do anything, and yet the officer has immediately gone to tase Mr. Cure. So there is a valid argument to say that the officer escalated this situation. And I think that would be a reasonable thing to say. You tase a man that hasn't posed really any physical threat towards you. He's a little resistant. He's asking you questions, but that doesn't give you the right to try to tase him. He hasn't tried to flee. You aren't chasing him and telling him to stop. Why did you immediately resort to tasing him before he had actually done anything? He hadn't taken any violent actions towards you. This type of thing happens a lot. But this is kind of the analysis that civil rights attorneys go through when assessing whether or not an incident is one of police brutality. And from where I'm seated right now, this could be seen, just this initial interaction right here. I'm not talking about the rest of what happened, but just from right here, that the officer's actions so far with tasing Mr. Cure could be seen as being excessive. Wow, I'm going to pause right there. So did you notice that when Mr. Cure was tased, it looked like it had no real effect on him? That could be for many reasons. So tasing is really designed to do what's called incapacitate your muscles. It doesn't actually send heat into your body. It doesn't shock you. People think it makes them feel like they're on fire. That's not what it does. It has two probes, and with the appropriate spread, the probes will then go into your body, and then they will then shock your muscular system to then stop you from moving. That's why you see a lot of people when they tase, they immediately fall down because their muscles have seized and they can no longer move and they fall into the ground. They appear to not really have an effect on Mr. Cure. That could be for a few reasons. It could be because the spread at which the officer fired his taser did not enter Mr. Cure's body appropriately to incapacitate his muscles. That could be a reason. One of the probes may not have been properly working. It could be many things, but it is interesting that the tasing didn't really have the effect that the officer thought it was going to have on Mr. Cure. And then we see that Mr. Cure then begins to engage the officer and fight him.
Yeah, bitch. Yeah, bitch. Sit down. Sit down. Sit down.
Okay, wow. This is a really violent encounter. So the officers tase Mr. Cure. Mr. Cure has fought back. Looks like Mr. Cure is then going after the officer, going aggressively towards his face. Now, you notice that the officer does not immediately go for his firearm. If you look back a few seconds before I just stopped it, the officer actually pulled out his baton, or what's also called his asp. Looks like he was going to try to deliver some blows to Mr. Cure, but then Mr. Cure then continued to go in and attack the officer. You can see right now he has him kind of like by a face hold, trying to push him to the ground. You should never do this. No matter what happens, no matter what an officer has said, or tased or anything like that, I do not advocate fighting the police. It's just these encounters can end so tragically. And as a civil rights attorney who's handled a lot of these cases, I can tell you that police officers are trained to win. What I mean by that is police officers are trained to win at all costs. They are trained to not lose a fight, and they will win a fight by using lethal force if necessary, and that includes discharging their weapon. So, fighting the police is going to get you, it's going to ensure that there's a chance that you might lose your life if you decide to fight the police. I never, ever, ever, ever advocate for anyone to engage the police in any type of combat, ever, because you will lose.
Camden, shots fired! Shots fired, Camden! Stay down! You're gonna get up! Stay down! Stay down! Stay down! Camden, shots fired! Suspect down! You send me help! Stay down! Stay down!
Wow. So during that struggle, the officer discharged his weapon at Mr. Cure. So once again, I'm looking at this from the perspective of a civil rights attorney and from the perspective of would this be a case that I would take on to bring a lawsuit against the police for excessive force, wrongful death like that. And my assessment would be no. I would not bring a case on behalf of Mr. Cure. Let me tell you why. Mr. Cure did not follow lawful commands. Mr. Cure fought the police. It appears an credible argument could be made that Mr. Cure was trying to take this officer's life. I think that would not be far-fetched to say. Now, that is not to diminish, what Mr. Cure went through, and I'm going to talk about in a few moments, what he went through from being wrongfully incarcerated for 16 years and what they did to and what that does to a person. I'm just speaking about this from a pure, from the pure assessment of what happened during this incident. And what happened was that the officer was attacked by Mr. Cure, and he had to make a decision to use lethal force. And I don't see any jury siding against this officer in a civil rights lawsuit or, frankly, in a criminal case where the officer might be charged for taking Mr. Cure's life, which I don't think is going to happen in this case. I actually could see if this case were to be filed as a lawsuit, I could see this case being dismissed by a judge on what's called summary judgment. And what that means is that based on the objective evidence, based on the facts known so far, that the judge can make a decision without even letting it go to a jury. And I can see a judge saying, looking at this video and looking at what happened, there's no jury that will ever find against this officer. And therefore, I'm going to dismiss this case because the officer's actions were reasonable. So I could absolutely see that occurring. And it's just really tragic that Mr. Cure had to leave this earth like that. It really is, because when you think about his story and what happened to him, so Leonard Cure was a man who was arrested and convicted in 2004 of a robbery he didn't commit. He had absolutely no connection to the crime that he was convicted of. There were suggestive lineups that were done in the investigation of the robbery. Even the judge in his criminal case said so. And Mr. Cure was ultimately convicted even though he had nothing to do with the robbery, and he spent 16 years in prison. And what that does to a person, I mean, I've been a lawyer for some time now. I've interacted with a lot of people who've been incarcerated, both for crimes they committed and crimes they didn't commit. And prison is horrible. Prison in America is absolutely horrible. And for someone who spent over a decade in prison for a crime they didn't commit, that can do some really serious things to your mind. And it's clear that Mr. Cure, when he was fighting this officer, again, not excusing his actions, but these are not the actions of someone who is in their right mind. This is clearly someone who had suffered tremendously and may have had some serious mental health demons that he was battling. So it's just tragic that it ended this way, but this is not a case that I would bring on behalf of Mr. Cure.